Okay. Ah, not from the beginning. Not from beginning. Let's try this again. Third time's charm. Okay.
Frank
So
Lloyd
this is
Wright
the
is
second
the
half
next
of
artist we're going to talk
PBA.
about.
Oh,
Those
that's
building blocks.
that is not going to be helpful. Hold on. Let's try this again. Let's just do it this way. I'll let it do it.
Frank Lloyd Wright is the next artist we're going to talk about. Let me go back here real quick. Oh, we won't. Frank Lloyd Wright was an American architect born in Wisconsin on June 8th, 1867. Through his lifetime, he was an architect, interior designer, writer, and teacher. When he was younger, he was inspired by his mother to follow his dreams. One of the things you should know about him that's probably going to be asked about is how he got his interest in starting as a child. He started working with those building blocks that you likely had as a child as well. He started the Prairie School of Design. Those types of houses have those overhanging eaves, edges of the roof stick out past the edge of the building, like you see in the white building in the middle. They're often grouped in long horizontal bands. The windows are, if you look at that little streak of light in the window on the left, or those bands of windows going horizontally in the building on the right. The movement was a reaction to houses that were built in a factory and of poor quality design. These architects used solid design and materials to create homes that would last. Wright believed in craftsmanship. The Prairie schools have a very open floor plan, which means very often there weren't walls that impeded. Again, if you look at that space on the left, it's a very open space. Often made out of natural materials, and that was to kind of help them blend in with their surroundings. And as you can see, these are a couple of examples, and they often even made use of the materials that were local to that area, but they tried to make the homes blend in with their surroundings. Again, they also use these large windows to let that outside come in. As Wright's unique style developed, he became inspired by nature more and more. This is one of the homes he created called Falling Water. This is what I'll talk a little bit ask you a little bit about Falling Water. This design it makes use of a river that literally runs through the home. It's a beautiful home, but it often has some architectural issues with it as related to having a bunch of water come to the home all the time. Talisman West was built in 1937. This was the space that he used as a training center, really, for architects and apprentices who came to study with him. He started making these Usonian homes after he was challenged to make a home that only cost $5,000. But even in the very inexpensive homes, and you see an example of one on the left, he designed everything down to the furniture in these homes. He was famous for designing the furniture, particularly these chairs, which made use of these elongated rectangles. Very often, he was obsessed with these geometric shapes. We've specifically looked at the way that Frank Lloyd Wright made use of stained glass and designed the stained glass in the homes that he created. He designed those specifically to go with his architecture that he was designing the home. Those windows were almost a parallel reflection, and when I say parallel reflection, I mean literally the lines in the windows paralleled the lines in the architecture. And so we see that an example of that in that top left window. He did use color glass quite often, but he stuck with those primary colors: reds, yellows, blues, greens, and purples, primary and secondary colors, and very often those very simple geometric shapes: circles, triangles, rectangles, and so forth. The next artist that we studied was Frank Stella, American artist born in Massachusetts in 1936. One of the things that I'd like for you to know about him is he was learned from his father, who was a painter. He was a house painter, so he really became obsessed with these common tools that normal artists and regular people had to use. When he painted, he often painted in enamel paints, which are not a fine art paint. They're more of a traditional home or um, material you might paint houses or even cars with. Stella's art changed drastically over time. Sometimes he would start off with these drawings or paintings that he would paint over and over again. He was inspired by William de Kooning, Franz Klein, but he really wasn't as inspired by the abstract as he kind of hoped he would. He started looking for new ways to express himself through his paintings. And so to find his style, he started practicing paint by painting over works again and again until he came up with what he was really looking to finish with. When he worked on the black paintings, this series where he focused just on black and gray values, he started to come up with a style of painting that really struck a note with him. And he started to figure out that this is sort of what he was looking for. He started experimenting with color and that same type of basic use of shape that he had been using in the black series, the black painting series. But now he started introducing color, started looking at how color could control the movement of the eye in a work of art. He continued to use these shapes, these basic colors and shapes, the primary and secondary colors, the circles, triangles, and squares, and so forth. And then he goes into this protractor series where he's specifically focusing on the circles and half circles and starts creating these, again, elements that use that color to get our eye to travel through these works of art. In his later work, Stella removed the canvas altogether, and we sort of did with this with our second piece on the Make Day, where we started looking at the freedom of creating lines and shapes and colors in any way you really wanted to go. Things got very wild, again, he used pattern and repetition and some of those things to help create in some of that unity. But by using so many elements, he developed this style that became known as maximalism. And then he sort of finishes up his styles with this. And I won't say finishes up; he works later than this. But what we looked at, he finished up sort of with this layered works of art where he's got patterns layered over top of one another. Lots of use of curved lines, much organic shape, much more complicated color. We see teals and blue greens and red oranges, and it's not just the primary secondary they'd seen before. But again, he maintains that rhythm and pattern by keeping that use. So again, if you look at the pattern on the left, you see the repeated yellow lines, the repeated use of that teal color. Those type of things again help achieve and keep that rhythm and unity. All right. The attendance answer question is a recycle. Today it's Claude Monet.
Nope, it's not Claude Monet. Hold on. There we go. Let's get on with David Hockney. Oh, goodness. I'm having Zoom trouble. Go figure. All right, let's try this again. There we go. All right. The next artist is David Hockney. He was that English painter born in the 1937. The only reason I want you to even have any clue or understand when he was born is just so you understand he worked in around the same time as Bridget Riley. And they both were responding to the artists who had come before them, looking at particularly those cubists and surrealists and that kind of thing. He most well known for those photo collages. We took a look at those collages. He would take lots of different photos of a unique area. He would arrange them so that they created one unique piece of art. And it was sort of a response to what he saw going on at the time and around him, which was that cubism. And he was sort of responding to what
We can't see your screen.
Oh, Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Try that again. Why did it stop share? All right, let's go back here. All right. Try this again. So David Hockney, yeah, born in the 30s. Again, worked in that time with Bridget Hockney. He did those photo collages where he took those individual photos and assembled them into a single image. Again, he was responding to the Cubists. We see here Picasso images, and he's um, doing something similar. He's breaking down his image into these smaller areas to kind of look at is really what's going on here. And that's sort of what the Cubists were doing. They were breaking things down. They would often say they were disassembling and would show an object from multiple angles so that you could better examine it. And that's sort of one of the approaches. And that's kind of what he's doing here. If you look at these little individual photographs, each one tells a bigger story than if he has a single photograph of him just sitting in that chair. We see emphasis placed on like the shoes, the hands, the eyes, the face area, and so forth as those become enlarged in that space. He traveled in the 80s to Arizona, to the Grand Canyon, and he got to witness and experience this huge, vast space and sort of had a similar response. He starts taking lots of photographs and he begins to collage those into one unique big piece of art, but then he takes it a little further and he paints that into this image, which makes big use or good use of that abstracted color, the bright, bold oranges. And this is a big painting. It has a lot of presence. If you stand in front of it, you can feel the overwhelming sense of this space. He then starts working with those abstract colors and he starts focusing and emphasizing line and shape and color. And we see those in these typical works of his. We see that use of line in this top left one with those strong vertical and horizontal lines. Those verticals in the bottom left were the most typical. That's a real typical painting he did with these vertical trees. He was responding to a lot of the forest that he had experienced. He's using the line again of those little French fry shapes, kind of pushing stuff back into space. And of course, on the bottom right, we see him making big use of that line as it winds its way back into space, those mountains. The vertical and horizontal lines were very ever present, I should say, in his big tree paintings. We see those horizontal horizon lines, but we've got those strong vertical lines created by the tree trunks. What you should know about him, again, born in 37, mostly you should know that he worked primarily in the 60s, 70s, 80s, that time period. Known for those Cubist-inspired photo collages and large, colorful paintings that used emphasized line and abstract color. The next is Bridget Riley. She was that op artist. And if you remember, op art is that optical illusion art. Op means optical illusion. And so those op artists sought to trick the brain. Again, she was born in 1931, just a few years before Hockney was. So they worked in and around that same time, 60s, 70s, and 80s. This is when we see the bulk of their work that was most impacting. Understanding op art, what op art did was try to trick our eyes, tried to make us see movement where movement wasn't really occurring, or tried to create depth where there really wasn't depth, but tries to play some kind of trick on the brain. One of the things we talked about with Riley that you should know was about that way she worked, her process. She was a process painter. She started off as a graphic designer and illustrator, so she began using those illustration tools, which gouache is an opaque watercolor that designers and illustrators use. That's where she got her kind of understanding of how to use that material. But she would do these drawings, these elaborate drawings. She would do these gouache paintings. She would then take acrylic over the gouache, and then she would even glaze over that acrylic with oil paint. So she would have these multi-layered paintings. All these paintings you're looking at are multiple layers. And most artists today work in a direct method, which they would first of all use a tool, which she didn't do. They would use some type of measuring tool, grid off these things, and then apply one direct color, probably an acrylic paint, directly to the canvas. But that's not what she did, and that's why hers looked very professional and complete. She didn't use any measuring tools, no masking tools, no, didn't even take things off. She did everything by hand. Again, you should know when she was born, when she worked. Again, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Leading op artist, and that's where we're kind of focusing on the artists that led these different movements. Op art seeks to trick the brain. You need to know that. And she didn't use any special tools to create her very precise works of art. Last but not least, Salvador Dali. He was that weirdo, and he was really weird. His parents taught him that he was the reincarnated son that they had lost before him, his brother who passed away. Uh, and so he had a very skewed sort of understanding of reality to begin with. And he takes that skewed understanding and he creates surrealism. And really, surrealism was a response to what we call the Dada movement. And the Dada movement was a very brief movement art period between World War One and World War Two, sort of, and kind of captured both ends a little bit. But those Dadaists were using very often sort of weird sculpture things. They would create these collages and assemblages that had some kind of unique and weird things going on. And mostly what they were doing is responding to the war. It was a European movement that mostly focused on what was going on in Europe and how they responded to the war. But that weird stuff that they started with, Dolly really takes and expounds on, and they start using what they call the concept of automatism. The idea that we are automatically doing things and thinking things and stuff is sort of automatically happening. And what they sought to do was capture their subconscious. What was that goes on when they don't know what's going on, essentially? And we do that through our dreams. That's a way we can kind of see what goes on in our subconscious. So they use a lot of dreamlike qualities in these surrealist paintings, and displacement as part of the surrealist movement, where you have things where they don't belong. The chess pieces don't belong in the ocean, and so forth. Um, Abstraction and distortion, the melted clocks are a part of that surrealism. The abstracted animals, using those anamorphic creatures and that sort of thing, are all part of that surrealistic movement. Remembering it's dreamlike, it's that capturing that subconscious. Um, you should also recognize that in addition to creating all that weird stuff, he created a lot of unity in the way he used his elements. But we're going to focus mostly on how that surrealism played. And we look at displacement here as the butterflies, representing this owl. The abstraction as this owl has an arm. We see displacement again as those butterflies are the sails to that ship. And then, of course, we've got the anamorphic use of, these really strange, fleshy looking giraffes here on the right. And he worked with Walt Disney, and it was kind of an interesting collaboration. Disney's very mainstream. Dolly was very surrealistic. It's a very crazy thing. We watched a few minutes of it, and you saw influences of both those neat animations that Disney brought, but some of that weird, twisted mind stuff that Dolly brought. You should know that Dolly was the most famous and important surrealist in the surreal movement. He was known for his use of abstract animals, use unusual environments and displacement, putting things that do not belong. He had those dreamlike paintings. Dolly worked with Disney to create Destino, that really crazy, weird movie. And your final, last attendance answer of the year, R2D2. R2D2 is my favorite. If you watch the Star Wars movies, you should know they should all be called R2D2 Saves Everybody. There wouldn't have been a second, third, fourth, fifth through ninth movies if it hadn't been for R2D2, the first ones. He saves everybody every episode. I mean, every movie. All right, guys, that's it for today. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'm going to stop the share and stop the record here.